Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to meet one of those special people. The people that not only have an opinion, but who are willing to do something about it and try and make our lives better. The person you're going to meet tonight has been doing it for a while because he's coming from the Senate already. So this is not the first time at this rodeo. But let's start with an introduction.
Thanks for having me, and hello to Milford. It's really an honor to be here. My name is Eric Lesser. I'm a state senator from Longmeadow, a town right next to Springfield, about 80 miles or so west of here, and I've been representing that region in the state senate for 8 years. Now I'm running for lieutenant governor.
Are you allowed to come from outside of 128?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because it's actually an important part of my pitch, and I think you can appreciate that in Milford. We need a perspective of someone at the high levels of the executive branch from who can speak to the whole state, and we need a ticket at the State House that can speak to the whole state. I think the perspective I have coming from a region far away from Beacon Hill and frankly a region and an area of the state that's been overlooked for a long time by policymakers is going to be an important perspective.
Never overlooked for revenue from the Mass Pike.
Right, exactly.
It seems
Yeah, we
like
were promised no tolls. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like everybody remembers us. But that was one
Absolutely.
thing I liked about having a lieutenant governor from Central Mass, is at least we got some perspective on the whole state.
Well, if you look at recent governors, right, and recent administrations, there has been a sense that you do need that sense of balance. If you think about Charlie Baker with Karen Polito from Shrewsbury, or Deval Patrick with Tim Murray from Worcester, or Bill Weld with Paul Salucci from Hudson, or Paul Salucci, who was from Hudson going all the way to Williamstown with Jane Swift. So I think that it's important because we want to have the whole state represented in decision making, and giving voice to the different regions of our state is important. And you know what? There's a lot of similarities between my neck of the woods and Milford and the greater Milford area.
It was always amazing because when Richie Neal used to come on the show, and his district started in Milford,
Right.
and went out almost to Springfield. And I used to laugh saying he's probably got the most diverse array of constituents.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean that the whole kind of I-90 kind of southern corridor has a lot of diverse communities, right? You've got urban areas, you've got very rural areas, you've got small towns, you have suburbs, and that's what my state senate district has been like. But I think that that's going to be an important perspective as lieutenant governor. Just a few of the things I really want to focus on. We have got to do more around transportation. One of the key things I've worked on for the last 8 years has been connecting our state by high-speed passenger rail service from Pittsfield through Springfield through Worcester to Boston. So just why would this be important for Milford too? Well, first it would be the single biggest reduction in greenhouse gas emissions our state has ever undertaken, taking thousands of cars off the road. It would reduce congestion when we know that that's strangling our state and preventing people from being able to get around. And this is key, it would create thousands of units of new housing, affordable housing that's near transit and walkable and clean. And we know one of the biggest challenges we've got is people can't afford Massachusetts anymore. I mean, this is a great state. We've got so much going for us here. But if people can't afford to buy a home, if they can't afford rent, if the prices continue to go up the way they are, people are going to have to leave, and we're going to lose a lot of that
But
opportunity.
see, that would be great because people can't afford parts of Massachusetts.
Exactly, right.
You know, when I was in D.C., they used to consider Frederick as out in the boonies.
Right.
All of a sudden, they got trains.
Yep.
And it became an attractive place to live because you could get into D.C. within the hour, and you could afford the housing.
Exactly.
I mean, we think of Longmeadow. I can't imagine wanting to commute today from Longmeadow to Boston.
No. And the big game changer there, by the way, people do that commute, the super commuters, because they have no choice, because they can't live in Eastern Mass because of how expensive it is, but they have jobs that require them to be there, and it's very stressful for people. But the big game changer here is remote and hybrid work, because it probably was unlikely that someone would take a train from, let's say, Springfield or even Pittsfield 5 days a week back and forth to Boston, but someone could do it if it's a day or two a week. And, I chaired a commission on the future of work in the Senate where we looked at the future of work, the future of our economy. 98 of the 100 top employers in Massachusetts said that they were permanently incorporating either hybrid or remote work models. So if you think about it, that changes everything. It changes the commuting patterns, it changes the places that people live, and we need a transportation system that catches up to that.
Might as well start with my first question.
Oh, I thought we were already into questions.
I
There
was
we
going
go.
to say, but I always start the show by asking a basic question. Eric, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Yeah. Well, I think for the reasons I just described, there's a couple things about my campaign that I think are unique in the role for lieutenant governor and make me particularly well suited to the role. First, I'm the only candidate in the race who's outside of 495. And I do think that's an important perspective. And I know Milford is kind of on the line, but Milford is a place, is a region that has often been overlooked by policymakers, hasn't necessarily been at the center of decision making. You have a great state rep who showed me around today, Rep. Brian Murray, and I think he would agree with me that it's often a struggle to keep issues in communities like Milford or Franklin or Worcester or Springfield or Holyoke, where I come from, at the front of the decision-making kind of structure. So that's a very big item. The second is I'm the only candidate in the race with federal experience. I worked for 4 years for President Obama.
I'd say you're one of the White House alum.
Absolutely, yeah, and including working for his Council of Economic Advisors during the response to the Great Recession. And it's important for people to remember we're going to have more than $9 billion in new infrastructure money coming to Massachusetts from the Biden infrastructure plan alone. We need people, as you mentioned Richie Neal, I'm honored to have his endorsement and his support because he has said, as one of the most powerful members of Congress, that I'm the person, that the partner he needs in state government to make sure that those federal funds are flowing and shovels are in the ground. And then the final thing I just add is, my work history over the last 8 years. I've been part of multiple conference committees that have helped get some of the highest stakes items done at the State House, including 2 huge economic development bills that included funding for municipal infrastructure, for broadband, for vocational education, closing the skills gaps for our employers. I've also been part of an effort to get a student loan borrower Bill of Rights done, a new protection for 800,000 student loan borrowers across our state. I work closely with Attorney General Healy, who helped us write that legislation and whose office is now implementing it now that it's been passed. So I think I offer a set of experiences that are going to help the next administration and make me the right partner.
And we don't want to
Governor
forget,
Healy.
all of a sudden we got money for our library.
Exactly.
And I understand your hand and Brian's hand were in that pot to create it.
Yeah. So Brian, or Rep. Murray, and I are co-chairs of the Libraries Caucus, which is a great caucus in the legislature that connects all the elected officials, or all the state reps and state senators who care about libraries. And we've been able to secure record funding for our library construction programs to help build and renovate libraries across Massachusetts, including in Milford, and also to help with things like technology upgrades, interlibrary loans so that you can move materials and books and other research products around the system more easily, better educational and outreach programs, hotspots, which is one of the most requested items during COVID. So yeah, it's been a really great project for me. And as Lieutenant Governor, I really want to be the library's Lieutenant Governor. And I want to build up our local libraries that we've got in really almost every community in our state.
2-part question. Number 1 is, what is a lieutenant governor? But following that, why would you leave the Senate to be a lieutenant governor? But let's start with, people don't understand, what is a lieutenant governor?
Yeah. So just backing up, so Massachusetts is one of a handful of states that has a split ticket for electing governor and lieutenant governor in the primary. In the primary, everybody is on a separate line. And voters will be making a decision, primary voters will be making a decision about who they want as the pair, right? You vote for governor, and then you separately vote for lieutenant governor. After the primary, the two combine into a single ballot line. So it's a big responsibility for the voter because it's thinking through who you want the team to be, what you want the ticket to be, both for November, but also, most importantly, for being able to govern and being effective once in office.
But we're a state that the pair has to be from the same party.
Yeah, some states, like I believe Texas, it's completely separate.
You
Yeah.
could have a far right and a far left pair coming together.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a system where it continues to be separate on the general election ballot
Right.
also, yeah, which can create interesting dynamics.
I never knew how that one was going to work.
But to answer your question on the role, so constitutionally there's two roles. Obviously to serve in the absence of the governor, but also very importantly to chair the governor's council. And the Governor's Council, for people who might not be familiar, is the body in state government, the elected officials in state government, that approve all judicial nominations made by the governor, and also approve all pardons and commutations. And I think that this is a very important role, especially when we think about the questions we've got around criminal justice, around policy questions on our appellate courts at the SJC, and just a little bit about my background. I'm a lawyer. I'm a graduate of Harvard Law School. I'm the vice chair of our Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And when I worked for President Obama, I was involved with 2 Supreme Court nominations for Elena Kagan and for Sonia Sotomayor. So I think I'm well suited to help move Governor Healey's nominees through the Governor's Council, help prepare them, and help recruit candidates that really reflect the diversity of our state. But potentially the most important element of the job, aside from the 2 kind of official constitutional roles, is to be a support for the governor and to have that trusting relationship with the governor and to help implement the governor's agenda. And I've got the history of working with Attorney General
Well,
Healey.
we've been lucky that governor's council candidates have come here to get votes, but more to educate, because most people had no idea what a governor's council is. And what I bring up today, if you think about the role, and we'll talk more later in the show about the Supreme Court nominees, anybody who doesn't think that it's critical who we appoint to the court system isn't looking at the news.
Right.
So, your role in helping pick the nominees to the Governor's Council, helping get the right nominees through, it's got to be critical, even if people don't understand it.
It's essential, and the courts make policy. The SJC, is making policy on a regular basis. The courts are implementing a lot of the policies passed by the legislature, and frankly have a tremendous amount of discretionary authority in terms of how laws are implemented, how laws are followed up on, and it's very important that we get it right. And we're here in Milford. Another perspective that is important is geographic diversity on the courts. We need judges who represent all of the diversity of our state. We need more racial diversity, more gender diversity, and also very important is diversity of experience. I do think Governor Baker's made a lot of really good appointments, but there's been, I think, too many prosecutors. You want public interest lawyers, environmental lawyers. I'd like to see more public defenders. It just adds to the richness of the experiences and to the diversity of perspectives. And geographic diversity is important too. I want to see more judges from the South Coast, more judges from Southeastern Mass, more judges from the Milford, Franklin area, more from Western Mass, of course, and the North Shore. So that's the intentionality we need to bring to the role, and you need to have a strategy around implementing that.
Well, one thing I was pleased was at least we're getting some people in the last decade or so outside of 128.
Right.
With Tim Murray, with Karen, because a lot of times being Metro West, you kind of feel that the only time Beacon Hill remembers us is when it comes down to collecting tolls on the Mass Pike.
Yeah, as a Mass Pike Senate district myself, I feel you on that one.
So, all the other candidates that have come on have asked the question saying, are you going to remember that life exists outside of 128? But I don't think I have to ask you that.
No, you definitely don't have to ask me that. I live 90 miles away from Beacon Hill, and I do that drive all the time. And one of the big pieces of my campaign is helping connect our state better connect our state by rail service, by high-speed broadband, better connecting our state by intentional policy to include our regions in all of the richness and innovation that Massachusetts has to offer.
Now, we'll talk about housing, but education. You have children, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Three kids: a 9-year-old who's about to enter 4th grade, a 5-year-old who's about to enter kindergarten, and a 16-month-old who's just running around the house and causing a ruckus.
Boys?
2 girls. The older ones are girls, and then the little guy is a boy.
I always get in trouble when I make a sexist comment like, girls are wonderful to have as children because they never forget their old dad.
Oh, well, I certainly hope that that's the case for mine.
I mean, my darling bride had to go through the friction of a teenager growing up, and it wasn't until they went away to college.
A mother-daughter house can.
Oh. But even today, my oldest daughter comes over the house 3-4 times a week, brings the grandkids. I can't ask for better.
Now, how old are your grandkids?
7 and 3.
Yeah, great ages. Yeah, 7's a great age. 3 can be a little tough. They got feisty personalities at 3.
Oh, God, yeah. But the good news is it's like the debates we have about carbo loading. I see nothing wrong with it. There's a Dairy Queen a mile from my daughter's house. My grandson loves French fries and ice cream. We load them up.
Hand them to the parents.
Drive them home before the carbohydrate titer builds up. I'm already home.
So you're the hero. You're the good guy giving them the ice cream, and then your daughter's got to clean up the mess.
The famous one was we were at a FinCom meeting, and my phone lit up, and the message was, "You are a dead man."
Uh-oh.
We were out, and my grandson looked and said, "Vovo, I need that chocolate bunny." Well, if he needs it, we got him the chocolate bunny.
Who are you to say no?
I thought he'd eat the ears off it. And yeah, apparently he ate the entire chocolate bunny before anybody noticed. And it's 9:30 at night, and he's ricocheting off.
That's when your daughter needs to call you and say, you got to help with bedtime.
Yeah, well, the problem was she saw me on TV at the FinCom, so she knew she couldn't, so she texted. But now we talk about education. Last year, Beacon Hill saved us. For 30-some years, we were adding 1 net child per year to our school system.
Right.
The last few years, it's been adding, like last year, 220. I mean, that's almost a whole school. The school department came to us and said, we need $6 million more because of the ELL, special needs, and the low income. I mean, we've been fortunate in Milford. Our department heads really do treat the town like their own home. So this will be like 15 years of surplus in a row. Can't ask for better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But $6 million got me a little nervous.
Yeah.
You know, and the Education Act that was passed actually focused on the 3 areas that Milford needed help on. And we got $7 million incremental dollars last year, which I found amazing.
Thank the legislature for that.
That's what I'm saying. That Beacon Hill came through. What effect can you have as Lieutenant Governor on improving our education in Massachusetts?
Well, first, protecting our public schools, investing in education is one of the most important and urgent things that state government and local government, of course, does, right?
And the father of 3.
Yeah, and my kids are in the public school system in Longmeadow, and it's something that we care about deeply. Just a couple thoughts. First, the Student Opportunity Act and the rewriting of the education funding formula was a big game changer, and is going to continue to help pay dividends. But just a few things that I think we still need to work on. Something I'm very passionate about, I've done a lot of work with former Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray and others, is on vocational education. We need to close the wait lists at our vocational schools. Frankly, there had been a de-emphasis on career and technical education over the last 15, 20, 30 years in our schools. And I think that was a mistake because we now have all of these workforce shortages and we've got a lot of unfilled positions that pay really well. and that companies need. So I think we've got to recalibrate that. I'd like to see a lot more expansion of voc ed and CTE education. We've also got to do a lot more around special ed because districts are still really struggling with fulfilling that obligation because it has to be done. But it's expensive, and the state needs to support cities and towns in that. And another really big piece, and this is another perspective I have, from being in Western Mass, is, the regional school transportation, a big issue, still not properly funded by the state. And a really big burden for our regional school districts. I've got a couple other things I'm very passionate about. I'm very passionate about financial literacy in schools. I think that's an example of something that's been crowded out of curriculums. Young people should know how to balance a checkbook. They should understand credit. They should understand how savings work. They should understand interest rates. These are important life skills that, frankly, are more important than knowing the quadratic equation in terms of having success in life. And I feel strongly that we've got to do more around civics. It's really important for people to understand what it means to be a citizen, what it means to vote and participate in democracy, how they can be empowered to change their communities, to work to improve their communities. It's really important.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the VOTEC. We've got a phenomenal Blackstone Valley book.
One of the best, yeah.
Dr. Fitz has done so
I know him, yeah.
well. But I keep bringing up the question. There are people like my father who came to this country who, if you put him in an organic chemistry class, he wouldn't have done well.
Yep.
But you gave that man a tool.
Yeah.
He was a master. I mean, any, what I call traditional trades, he was unbelievable. But today, to get into a Blackstone Valley, you got to be in the top 10, 20% of your class academically. So I love to see what Dr. Fitz does with how many graduates and where they go to school. But I worry about people like my father. I mean, plumbers, electricians, trades. And now they pay.
Very well, yeah.
I mean, I ran a biotech. I designed, built, and ran a biotech facility. And I had good operator jobs.
Yep, yeah.
And to me,
pay better than jobs with a college
60,
degree.
70 grand a year.
And there's no student loans, or in theory,
No.
much less, yeah.
You could come right up. But I couldn't fill the positions.
Yep.
What can we do? When you say expand,
Yeah.
is it expand the breadth of the program or just the number of kids?
So this is a big topic. I really appreciate you asking. It's something I've worked on quite a lot. It's a very big deal for my area. Springfield Chicopee is an industrial area. The greater Pioneer Valley is a big manufacturing sector. My grandfather was a tool and die maker. So I come from a similar family where, his salary as a tool and die maker was able to support 3 children and a family of 5, in Brooklyn, New York, which you can't do now. And just a couple of thoughts on this. The other thing is I'm currently the chair of our manufacturing caucus, where we do a lot of work around workforce. We do a lot of work with employers in the business community on helping connect the employer and community with available, well-trained people. So just a few things. Zooming out a second, the state, I think, made a little bit of a mistake in the sense that there was a rush to emphasize to young people this idea that you had to go to college to be a success. The schools kind of pummeled that at kids. A lot of guidance counselors kind of pummeled that at kids. We obviously know that that is not true, and that there are incredible careers and very high-paying careers that do not require a college degree. And there was a crowding out for a while of vocational education, shop, pragmatics classes. We talked about things like financial literacy. Some of it was because of MCAS and the focus on MCAS, but it was also broader cultural changes. So we need to correct for that. And that's a broader kind of cultural shift. It involves the guidance counselors. It involves the attitude of administrators. It involves working with parents so that they understand that manufacturing, for example, is a really attractive field that their child or anyone could go into. And then we got to do some real significant policy changes. So just in the specific example you gave about the wait lists and the grade point average, that's a distortion of the intention of vocational schools, and I've been part of a coalition to try to change that. So the issue has been that the Voc schools have had admission screens. And so what happened over time is a lot of parents, a lot of students, who had every intention of going to college and had the best grades, were crowding into the vocational schools and taking up the slots for the students that intended to, work in the trades or work in voc or manufacturing fields. And what's ended up happening is that these very vital and very limited slots that really should be going to people who intend to make a career out of it aren't able to get it. So we've got to adjust and fix that admission system, and we also just need a lot more voc programs. We got to be honest about that. We've got to invest in more infrastructure. We've got to get the equipment. We've got to do a lot more with teachers. It's hard to find voc ed and CTE instructors because they can work. They have to actually take a pay cut to come into the school to do the training because they could work in their trade.
Well, that was always the science and math teachers.
Right.
You sit there and say, I want to hire biochemistry majors from college, and I can pay a lot more money than the schools.
It's a version of the same issue that you see with science and math teachers, right? If you're a machinist, if you're a tool and die maker, if you're an electrician, if you're a, an automotive, a technician or mechanic, you're getting paid a lot per hour to work in the private sector, and it's really an act of public service to come in and to teach schools. So it's fulfilling work. It's okay if it pays a little bit less, but it can't pay so much less that you're asking people
you still
to do
have to
something
feed
unreasonable.
3 kids.
Exactly, yeah. So we got to get the salaries up, and we got to be more flexible about letting, apprenticeship programs, for example, is a great way to go. I've been involved in a model in Chicopee where the employers are quite literally in the rooms with the prospective trainees and students, and then they're immediately placed into internships and apprenticeships, and then they've got a job the moment their training is over. I mean, that's the kind of work and flexibility we got to do.
And those jobs, we grew up with these stereotype ideas that if you went to college,
right,
you came out with a good paying job.
Which is not true.
Which, you sit there and say, you read about a lot of kids graduating with $100-some thousand of debt and an education that really doesn't lend itself to immediate employment.
This is a big problem. It's a problem, for my generation and people younger than me. I'm a millennial. And you saw with the millennial generation incredible debt obligations. Our generation was told you got to go to college, and that was the message that was bombarded at people, which of course we know is not true. But the effect of that has been massive student loans, and jobs that often don't pay that well after getting the college degree, especially if you add in skyrocketing housing costs, skyrocketing rents, and really high childcare expenses. You've got young grandkids, so you probably have seen this, but young families, you're in your 30s, you're trying to balance maybe loans you still owe from school, very, very high rent or mortgage on a house you bought that's very expensive, and of course now really high childcare bills to go do your job to pay all this off.
I don't know how the kids start out, Eric. When we graduated, had $32 in my pocket.
Yep.
But I didn't owe anybody anything.
Right, and you could start building right away.
So, you turn around and say, well, I got to get a house or a place to live. Probably have to get a car.
Right.
And you sit there and say, if I had to pay $1,000 or $1,500 a month in college loans, where do I get the money for the other 2?
Exactly. Well, this is the challenge of one of the key challenges of our time. And you see in Massachusetts what a great state we are, how much we have going for us, but how expensive it's gotten. It's too expensive, and it's choking opportunity from people. I mentioned the Student Loan Borrower Bill of Rights, but one really important thing I worked on with Attorney General Healy was creating a new licensing program for student loan servicers. These servicers are nasty. You know, they don't let people know about their rights. They don't let public sector workers like police, teachers, firefighters know about the interest rate reductions and the loan forgiveness that they're eligible for.
Now, Eric, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but help me understand. Simple old man logic.
Yeah.
I borrow money, I pay it back. I have the right to pay it back. What rights are you talking about that you would help?
So there's a whole host of actually federal programs that help incentivize, for example, working as a teacher. We just mentioned vocational ed. Working as a public safety officer, working military veterans are potentially eligible for all types of support for their loans. But there's a trust built in there because the servicer of the loan is the one who actually has to process that and notify people of their rights, and they weren't doing it. And in Massachusetts, it wasn't happening, and there were some big challenges. Let me just give you an example. It's more understandable if you talk about it on an individual level. I had a constituent in East Longmeadow. She is a special education teacher. You know, a very important job. We need special education teachers. It requires a lot of training, a lot of education, but it doesn't pay very well after getting all that expensive credentials. So of course she had loans. She had young children, and she came down with cancer and had to get chemotherapy. She had to take time off work, and had children to support as well. She couldn't even get her servicer on the phone to walk through what she was eligible for in terms of maybe deferrals or other programs to help her manage what was obviously a very hard time for her. She at the time then was in Connecticut, which had a student loan bill of rights law and had a licensing program and a student loan ombudsman and an office that she could call in state government that was there to represent the borrower. And that ombudsman was able to, like that, reach out to the servicer and get her into a better program. Massachusetts didn't have the same infrastructure. So that was a law I worked on. We worked on that for over 5 years to get that done. Also worked with Rep. Natalie Higgins on that, and a really great group of people, including Rep. Roy, Rep. Murray, from across the area to get that done. And Attorney General Healy's office is now implementing it.
Now, you're not talking about forgiveness of loans.
No. This is about the forgiveness. The forgiveness issue is not something the state can do because it comes. The loans
It's
are issued
federal
by the
money.
federal government, right? So,
But
yeah.
I mean, I understand there's programs that if you take on certain roles, that after 10 years you can get.
Right.
I won't say
This is the
forgiven.
program I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, that program is dependent on the servicer actually cooperating.
Well, I
with
got to
that
know
guy.
about it
Yeah.
to benefit from it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Why wouldn't the servicer advise you? I mean, they get paid either way.
It's a good question. I mean, some of it is just bureaucracy, some of it is mismanagement, and some of it is a financial disincentive for them, because, many times they do benefit from ballooning interest rates, from elongated payments. So it's a big problem.
Now, I know you can't crystal ball, but we really benefited from the recalculating of the formula.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I was stunned when I found out that 50% of the kids at Milford High are on free lunch.
Yep.
Which I find amazing. That means the family of 4 is living on $34,000. And we'll talk about housing separate,
Yeah.
but just stunning that you could live in this area on $34,000 a year. It really helped when we got that extra $7 million.
Yeah.
How's it look for the next year or two?
So we've made so in the legislature, we've made an obligation to fully fund the Student Opportunity Act, and that will be fulfilled. In fact, we've already segregated out some of the excess revenue that came in after the COVID economic spike for that purpose. So we're in good shape on keeping the Student Opportunity Act funded. As Lieutenant Governor, yeah, we could smile and celebrate that. As Lieutenant Governor, I think a really important role I can play is helping be that connective tissue between the governor and the executive branch and our local school districts, working with our legislative delegations, working with our school committees, working with our superintendents, our mayors, on implementation of these funding formulas, and also very importantly, feedback about how the money's being used, accountability about how the money's being used, and also feedback about where we need to patch things, where we might need more. One just example of this is rural schools. We have declining enrollment. I know here in Milford you've had ballooning enrollment, but you have another challenge in some communities with declining enrollment, which requires a different kind of response and a different kind of support. And we need to keep on top of these increasing enrollments, especially in districts like Milford, where a lot of the growth has been in lower income students that require more help and require more assistance to get up to grade level in their education.
But as a lieutenant governor, the issue that nobody likes to talk about but is here is immigration. I mean, you can't deport people to Rhode Island.
Nor should we.
No, but when people say you have to do something about immigration, I don't know what the Massachusetts government can do about controlling immigration.
Well, it's, first off, that's a purely federal policy, so something I like to do is focus on what the state government can do. And what state government can do is help make sure that we're supporting communities as immigrants come, and making sure that the communities are welcomed and helped and integrated and supported as they go into the school system, as they go into employment and jobs, support for childcare, support for housing services. And just like Massachusetts has been a gateway, a welcoming place for immigrants for generations. The Irish, the Italians, the Portuguese, people from Eastern Europe,
the Ecuadorians, it just
absolutely.
Rolls.
And so I think it's important as a value that we welcome people who are coming here to work, people who are coming here to build families, people who are coming here to build stakes in their communities. And state government does play a vital role in helping with the support for the school systems, helping with support for housing, helping with support for transportation access. These are core state services that you need to work on. And I think a perspective I've got too, my Senate district is really diverse in every way. I've got some of the densest urban communities in Massachusetts. I also have a town without a stoplight. For people who might not be familiar with the greater Springfield area, it's a very diverse region with a lot of different communities and different types of places. But one of the things I've learned from working in communities like that is people are actually pretty aligned on what they want and what they need. They want their kids and their grandkids, like you were talking about your grandkids, to have more opportunity than they had. And we were just chatting, about what people are facing with student loans, with housing prices, with all of these obligations. And there's a growing sense that the next generation isn't going to be as well off as the generation before, and that's what we need to tackle.
Now, when we look at housing, I'm stunned. I saw a house in my neighborhood go for $900,000. And I sat there.
How does anyone afford that?
Well, $900,000, when I was a kid, you could have bought Milford. They would have thrown in Hopedale and Mendon. But, you sit there and say, the average house in Milford, not a mansion, but something with 3 bedrooms, so you could have a couple kids, or 4 bedrooms, is over $500,000. What can we do? What can the governor's office do to help that?
There's a lot we could do. So just a couple of examples. Zoning reform is very important, promoting more housing.
Like 40B or?
No, not necessarily. Just more housing. We need more housing of every type. This is actually a very important issue. There's been estimates that we will have a shortfall as many as 300,000 total units across Massachusetts by the year 2030. There has basically been, if you look at a chart of Massachusetts, there was housing production, houses being built of all types, apartments, single family, multifamily, everything. The chart looked like this for, until about the 1970s, and now it's been like that since then. And so what you've had happen is a supply and demand issue. There is not a supply, and it's skyrocketing prices. But it does go deeper than that. We have a transportation issue as well, because we have a lot of places, a lot of regions in our state that people could live in affordably, but they're not connected to where the jobs are. So you end up with this lottery ticket system where people feel they need to live, within commuting distance of work, and because of the traffic, because of the bad mass transit, because the commuter rail isn't reliable, people, feel they have to live very close, and that is ballooning the prices. So a couple things that the state government can do, and a couple of things I'd want to do as lieutenant governor. We need to continue to implement zoning reform. We need to promote more transit-oriented development that's walkable, tied to mass transit, especially rail. And we need to work to support and help renters, because many people renting are seeing double-digit price increases. There's a correlation: when property values go up, rents go up. So we need to make sure that we're supporting renters, and that we're providing rental assistance. And then, I brought it up already, but our statewide rail project, our West East Rail project, would do more than anything to help with housing, because it would help connect people along a broader stretch of the state to homes that they can afford.
Well, I remember I used to take a train an hour a day because I was working downtown Paris, but I'm a Milford kid. I don't want to live in the city. So I went out as far as I could on the train, which was Saint-Germain-en-Laye, and lived right by the Bois de Saint-Germain, the forest. But that hour on the train was not an hour on Mass Pike.
Right. You could first you could sleep. You could take a nap. Yeah.
But I could keep busy.
Right.
It went away quickly because I could do some work. I could read a paper. So I like your idea, because if I could get to Worcester reasonably, quickly, if I could get from Western Mass to the Boston suburbs.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be Boston. Framingham, Worcester, Palmer.
I mean, you're looking at a lot of biotech out in Natick, Framingham. So that's even better.
And by the way, Springfield's got a lot to offer. So does Pittsfield. People could work in Pittsfield or work in Springfield who live in Natick or live in Westboro or live in
But now
anywhere.
we're not debating whether the trains are good or bad. We're debating there are no trains, or not enough trains.
Right.
Put you on the spot. Supreme Court made some comments on gun control.
Yeah.
How's that going to affect Massachusetts?
Well, I'm glad you asked this. The Bruin decision, the Supreme Court decision, was, I think, a terrible decision. It invalidated a law that had been on the books in New York for a very long time, which is, there had been a tradition in the Supreme Court of respecting, state legislature and state government decisions. And the Supreme Court invalidated that New York law. And in Justice Clarence Thomas's concurrence, he pointed to several states, including Massachusetts, as states that might be in jeopardy of having their laws invalidated as well, because the statutes were written in a similar way. So we actually worked as part of an effort in the Senate that we just did. Governor Baker signed it to patch that. To make sure that our laws could still be implemented, but I think, just zooming out, we are dealing with a very hostile and really an unprecedented Supreme Court, taking rights away that have been part of our country for 50 years. I think that the Dobbs decision, the repeal of Roe, is horrific. And it's something that is really creating immense amounts of fear.
Well, that's my next question.
Yeah.
But finishing on guns, is there a way in your mind of having a reasonable gun policy?
Well, I think Massachusetts has done a good job. We have I think the strictest gun safety laws in the entire country. We do have a lot more we need to do. We need to continue to update it and improve it. Just a couple of examples are ghost guns, which is a growing threat.
I don't get the need of a ghost gun.
No, that's why we need laws to
I
clamp
sit there
down
and
on
say,
it.
like, the law that says I should have the right to buy a gun today. Well, I'm a gun owner. And I bring up the example, when the trigger law came out, I went out and got my little trigger guard, put it on, and followed the law.
Right.
But if somebody came to me and said, Eric, I need to buy a gun right now,
That should raise a flag.
my
yeah.
antenna go up immediately saying,
Yeah.
if I know I'm going to a gun show this weekend or next week, I got plenty of time to go get a permit, get vetted. So certain laws, like I want a ghost gun. Why?
Right.
You know, it'd be like you coming to my house or the DA coming saying, we want to inspect your house for heroin. Go ahead. You know, I got nothing to hide.
Right.
Have a ball. I mean, having my gun registered doesn't bother me at all. You
And
know,
it shouldn't. People that are using, look, there's plenty of legitimate uses, right? Target practice, whatever. Sportsmen, sportswomen. And people
we
are
brought up
entitled
when
to
we used
it.
to go hunting for
Yeah.
deer. I had a vest and I had 3 or 4 rounds. That was enough for the weekend. I didn't need to be Pancho Villa.
Well, that's why what the Supreme Court did is so dangerous, right? Because New York, Massachusetts, many of the northeastern states, had these strict and appropriate gun safety laws on the books, and the Supreme Court, with a swipe of a pen, is now telling a duly elected state legislature that they can't do that. It's a big problem, and we need to be vigilant. And that's why, just again, I'm the only candidate in this race with federal experience, and I think that federal know-how is going to be important as we navigate this new landscape.
Will the Roe verdict, overturn, whatever you want to call it, have a big effect in Massachusetts?
Well, luckily the effect in Massachusetts is going to be limited because we have the Roe Act in Massachusetts. Abortion remains legal in Massachusetts. We also passed a set of protections this past July, which put in place additional protections, including a shield law for providers. So, for example, if a woman travels to Massachusetts from a state where abortion might now be illegal, our Massachusetts laws are going to protect that patient, are going to protect the providers, the medical providers, the doctors, the nurses, and are going to forbid Massachusetts law enforcement, Massachusetts courts from cooperating with potentially a renegade state that tries to do something. And that was important.
And
That was
again,
an
I don't
important
understand. You're a
protection.
lawyer. Maybe you can explain it to me. I live in Massachusetts. I elect senators and reps
Right.
to make laws for Massachusetts. Why does another state have the right to come in and try and tell me how to live in Massachusetts? I'm confused.
Well, I think the specific case in abortion, the concern would be if, let's say somebody from Texas or from Alabama came to Massachusetts in order to get care. In theory, they would now be violating their state of residence's law. So you could see a prosecutor or someone try to take action.
But they're in Massachusetts.
Right, but this is why we passed the shield law, to give people peace of mind. That the providers will not face scrutiny. They're not going to face cooperation from. There's cross-state cooperation on all kinds of potential crimes and issues on a regular basis. But we're making clear that reproductive health care is legal, reproductive rights are health care, and that Massachusetts is going to stand firm in protecting people's rights to that access.
It just boggles my mind that some other state would think they have the right to come into Massachusetts.
Well, we see some of these governors in some of these states, and we see some of these district attorneys in other places, and nothing shocks me anymore. We need to be prepared.
Well, it hits me because you can drive 75 miles an hour on the highways or 85 in Texas. Okay, that's Texas.
Right.
What right would we have to go in and say, no, you have to behave this way behind the wheel? We're from Massachusetts.
Right.
So taxes are a big question. The incremental charging of people. Because I hear we're only going to charge the rich.
Oh, the fair share amendment.
The fair share. And I get a kick out of it because when I ask people, what does rich mean? Usually I get the answer, it's somebody who makes $1 more than I do. Go ahead and tax everybody that's $1 above
That's a
my
good line.
salary. Because that won't affect me.
You're full of good lines tonight. Yeah.
What's
Is that a question?
yes, your opinion? What's this
Yeah.
fair share? Is it fair?
Yeah, so to be clear, the Fair Share Amendment is not about someone making $1 more than you. I think all of us could agree somebody making $1 million a year is rich and is wealthy.
And that's pure salary
Correct. Well, it's income. Yeah.
income. But I'm saying
So just to be clear, it's a 4% surtax or a 4% additional income tax on the margin over $1 million. So if somebody makes $999,000, they're taxed at the same 5% rate. If they make $1,100,000, it's only the 100,000
That the
over the
tax is
million
doubled.
that the tax is that it's not doubled, but that the tax is applied.
well,
to.
5% to 9% sure feels like.
Not quite, but I get your point. But this is going to impact a very small number of taxpayers in Massachusetts. And it's important because of all the issues we've just talked about, which is the growing inequality in our state, the growing concentration of wealth in smaller and smaller numbers of people, and the vital needs we have around education, around transportation.
But will it
investment.
stay there?
Yes.
My
it will.
worry is I remember the AMT, the alternate minimum tax. It was only going to be for the super rich. And then you look and it kept coming down, and
Yeah.
pretty soon police officers, which God bless them,
All right.
they deserve every penny they make, but they were getting hit with AMT.
Well, the AMT was a federal tax. I'm a little less familiar with that, and obviously Congress controls that. But on a state level, the Fair Share Amendment, just to be clear, is a ballot referendum and is delineated and spelled out in the referendum, which amends the Massachusetts Constitution, what the money has to be used for. So, in theory, down the line, could it be changed? Of course, but it's hard to do that, and it's unlikely that that's going to happen. And voters will get the chance to weigh in if people want to make an adjustment down the line. So I think it's appropriate.
It's just like I say, my one concern is that right now it's for the rich because they make more money than we all do. I mean, I don't like the name fair share because I have a hard time if somebody's paying $300,000-400,000 in taxes a year, saying they're not paying a fair amount.
Well, to be clear, someone who's making $300,000 or $400,000 would not apply the Fair Share Amendment.
No,
would
but I'm
not
saying in
apply.
taxes that they're paying that much.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, it all depends on what the denominator is, right? It's all relative. Sounds like a lot of money to me and you, but
Yeah, it does. We're getting near the end, but crime in Massachusetts. What can the governor do?
Well, governor and lieutenant governor can do quite a lot. Of course, they oversee EOPS, the Executive Office of Public Safety. They oversee things like Shannon grants, which provide aid to local communities to help fight crime and help with community policing partnerships. They help with training and training of police and law enforcement. So there's quite a lot that a governor and a lieutenant governor can do. And one of the most important issues around public safety is properly supporting our men and women in law enforcement, and also tackling those root causes of crime, the challenges we have around housing, the challenges we have around an economy that's increasingly straining people, the drug addiction crisis. I was just at a wonderful center here in Milton, where we talked about Milford, where we talked about the growing challenge of the opioid crisis. Exactly, an inspiring person. I mean, she is really amazing. And we had an incredible session together where we learned about the work that they're doing around recovery coaching, around helping with people who are struggling from fentanyl, which is growing in intensity. The drug crisis is getting worse in Massachusetts. We were doing well or doing better before COVID, but COVID has skyrocketed the addiction rates in many communities, and we've got to be really proactive at taking that on.
Well, I think people are finally starting to understand what the opioid crisis is.
Right.
Because when Amy came on the show,
I gotta watch that. Amy came on. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. When I grew up, and you said a heroin addict, well, that was a slimy person in the back alleys of Boston. And all of a sudden you realize today, this is your neighbor's daughter, your neighbor's son, who got hooked on painkillers and then couldn't afford them. I mean, it's a whole different animal when you start looking at people just like us.
Well, the drugs have also very importantly become increasingly deadly. The fentanyl that's lacing many of the substances now can kill a person instantly, and the addiction rates. The scale and the intensity and the potency of these drugs is really something we've never seen before, and makes it even more dangerous. Another program I worked on really closely with Attorney General Healy was a bulk purchasing program for Narcan. I filed legislation back in 2015 to help set that up. The idea of it is really very simple. The same way Costco or Walmart can negotiate in bulk for the purchase of products, the state of Massachusetts should be able to negotiate directly with the pharmaceutical company to buy in bulk and then transfer those savings to cities and towns.
It should be getting easier because the copies of Narcan, more and more we're seeing generics being proposed for Narcan.
Which is helping reduce prices, which is important. And by the way, the reason that's important is lower prices means we can get it into more hands.
More hands.
Yeah, more school nurses, more rec center heads, more police officers, EMTs, firefighters.
We're running out of time. I didn't ask you about your view on climate control. Can you summarize it in a minute?
Well, it's one of the most important, if not the most important issue we face in Massachusetts. I think the key on climate change is to think about it as an intersectional challenge that touches all these issues. You need a strategy around transportation, zero emission vehicles, more public transportation that's faster, gets gas emitting cars off the road. We need a strategy around housing. 20 to maybe 30% of the emissions in our state come from residential housing, so we need to do more around the Mass Save program, around building insulation, around green building. And we need to do more around electrification of mass transit, including the MBTA and T-service. And it's also a workforce issue. We talked about the shortages in the trades. We don't have enough electricians, carpenters right now to install the EV chargers we need, to fix and update the roofs. So we need a massive training program at our community colleges, at our tech schools to prepare for these green jobs.
We can continue this.
We can talk all night, yeah.
Eric, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
I think you should vote for me because I understand places like Milford. I come from a place like Milford, and I'm going to fight for places like Milford. As Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to fight for making life easier for people, for helping reduce the cost of housing. We didn't get to really talk about childcare, a major strain for young families. We've got to get transportation figured out. We've got to get West-East Rail done. And I'm going to be focused on those core issues that help people, make Massachusetts an easier place to live.
I still don't understand, but I hope your decision's right, that you can do as much as Lieutenant Governor as you've done for us in the Senate.
I appreciate that.
As always, I've always promised I'd never ask our 6 loyal viewers to vote for a specific candidate, but I reserve the right to beg you, get to know the candidates, and please get out and vote. This is critical. Anybody who doesn't understand that last year we got $7 extra million from Beacon Hill. Really helped our tax bill because we would have had to come up with that money anyway. So having people who understand who we are and who remember Metro West and Milford, not just for the tax dollars that come from the Mass Pike, is critical. So as always, may God bless and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Please get out and vote.
Hey,
And thank
tonight
you
was
for
a
coming.
good night. Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home.